Good morning. Let's see. I would like to begin by saying thank you to Eric for being here. Eric Haseltine. Am I pronouncing your name properly?
You got it.
All right. And Eric comes as a present to us. William was going to be here and couldn't make it, and so we have a kind of a double benefit by having you join us. Eric is probably the most famous guy in intelligence that you never heard of, and I actually, as you probably have done, when you Google somebody and you're looking for biographic material, and they're a FiRe person, and you get less than 20 or 30 hits, you realize that either they shouldn't be here at FiRe or they're working for intelligence, and of course B would be true for Eric. So it was amazing. I spent about an hour trying to find something better than what you sent to me. This is the authoritative document right here. What's interesting, of course, I think, at least to me, most of all, is not your current job, which is pretty fascinating, Director of National Intelligence / CTO of all intelligence groups in some kind of acting way, but that you're a Disney guy to start with. So we get this. I think we get this person who is not only very smart, but coming out from outside of the military industrial complex to begin with, and I don't know how Disney trains its people or how you train Disney, but quite a different world to live in. And I guess one of the thoughts I wanted to start with in terms of our conversation is, how did that happen? How do you go from being an Imagineer to being an NSA person or wherever it was that you landed next?
Well, I think I start by contradicting you about how smart I am, because why would I give up $1 million a year job to go work for 1/10 of that in the government?
Stand corrected.
But in all candor, what happened was General Hayden, who at the time was the head of the NSA, correctly believed that 9/11 was a failure of imagination. Mm-hmm. So they wanted people inside the government who had imagination. So where else to get it but Imagineering, where I was at Disney. And so I was recruited, and like a lot of Americans, I wanted to do something about 9/11.
Yeah.
So I went to work for General Hayden at NSA as the associate director there, and it was a tremendous experience. So that's basically it.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. A lot of folks here know, but I'll just tell you for the sake of our conversation. When 9/11 happened, I happened to be in Washington with about 30 senators in a hotel talking about broadband and how to get more of it, and that stopped right away. But there I was, stuck there for a week, and I got a phone call from one of our S&S members saying, well, what can we do? And he had the idea. So we've got this great network of guys. Let's figure something out. And he suggested that I take the leadership role on that. So I said, okay, good idea. So I sent an email out from Baltimore to all these folks and said, what would you do? You own a technology, or you run a technology company. And they all wrote back, and we created 2 versions of one book, one classified, one not classified, with these responses. It was 370 pages. We called it Project Intelligent Response. And the idea was, from a technical point of view, what would be helpful in terms of fighting terrorism. And then we hand-delivered, I went back to Washington a month later and hand-delivered this book to everybody I could find. Anybody would take one.
I'd like to see that.
I'll have a copy sent to you by email.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was, I understand the motivation there, because we were all trying to figure out how to fix this thing. So I understand that we're going to have to be gentle about talking about today's job that you're in, and I think I would like to jump right to the meat that you and I have discussed earlier of your interest, which is innovation and all that stuff. And so let's talk about that. When you have spent some time looking at processes, how great ideas occur or are prevented or suppressed or whatever, and tell me about that, and tell me where it took you.
Well, I thought in talking about that I could be most helpful in leaving the audience with fishing poles instead of fish. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to get into some predictions of what I think the next big thing is, but they're almost certainly going to be either duplicative of what you've already heard this week, or wrong, or both. Mm-hmm. But as Winston Churchill said, plans are worthless, planning is essential. Mm-hmm. And that is the process piece. So it is interesting that the innovation processes we used at Imagineering were directly applicable to the intelligence business. Because in a curious way, we used to be concerned with the Soviets' technology. But now we're concerned with Microsoft and Yahoo and Hotmail and cell phones and PDAs, because that's what our targets are using.
Right.
So it's curious that the exact meat and potato stuff I used to worry about at Disney is precisely the same stuff I spend a lot of time thinking about now. And as it relates to innovation, we have to look at two issues. One, how do we innovate? And then how do we get inside the head of our adversary and look at how they're innovating? Because let me tell you, they are very innovative. So there are a couple of thoughts. One has to do with envisioning the future as vectors. And what I envision the future, in order to invent it with innovation, I look at technology push as one vector and demand pull as another vector. And where the big wins lie is in the intersection between technology push and demand pull. So let me talk a little bit about how to think of technology push. I think there are some forces of nature in technology that are quite predictable. Dumb things are going to get smarter. Smart things are going to get connected to each other at an increasing bandwidth. These smart things are going to use their intelligence to know who you are, what you want, and where you are. So we're already to a point where you can carry a device that recognizes your voice, recognizes your face, in some cases recognizes your gestures, and uses its camera to look at your lips in order to recognize your voice better. These things in labs already exist. And I see those things converging to what Gordon Bell called an implosion. I don't know how many of you know about Gordon Bell's law, but he says that when enough features get packed into a sufficiently small place, you get an entirely new thing. And what I see happening on technology push, the biggest trend, is an implosion of all of those features that I mentioned, so that the thing that you carry around with you will know who you are, where you are, and what you want. So that is the big vector that I see with technology push. On demand pull, I see a latent unmet need for privacy, for personalization, which would seem to run counter to privacy, for convenience, and above all, novelty.
Novelty.
Yeah, I think that we have a society today that has ADD. You know, if you look at the way books are written,
You must have children.
I have no children.
Oh, well.
But as an Imagineer, I have an internal child that never grows up.
All right.
And so I can relate to kids very much. All I have to do is look in the mirror.
Okay.
And what novelty is an incredibly important factor in people's lives. You know, as a neuroscientist, I will tell you that when we do MRIs and we look at pleasure centers and what lights up, the thing that lights up your pleasure center more than anything is surprise and novelty. And so you can never get enough novelty, and by definition, you always need more of it, because whatever you have is yesterday's news, right? And so if I look at where the intersection in, say, the consumer and entertainment field of demand pull and technology push, what I see is three generic areas where we're going to have these Gordon Bell-like breakthroughs, or as Stephen Gould, the anthropologist, said, punctuated equilibrium.
All right.
If you look at evolution, and technology is just another instance of evolution, you don't see a steady increase in performance. What you see is flat with big steps. Now, those big steps in biology have to do with comets and volcanoes and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But we have digital comets that hit us, right? The internet was such a thing. We have societal things that happen. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Twin Towers. Those things were comets that also drive change. And so what I see is three areas of where we may see punctuated equilibrium with this collision of technology push and demand pull. And technology, I think, serves three purposes. One is you can take traditional media and consume it in new ways. So, for example, cell phones are not good places to watch television or movie. But what cell phones are going to have very shortly is laser projectors. And cell phones are also going to have no keyboards because you'll be able to talk to them and tell them what you want. I see that within the next 5 years. So that imagine that you're carrying around your cell phone and you can put it on something and project it onto a screen and see a decent size, decent resolution picture. And you will be able to watch television and movies and music videos and so forth.
Is there a company you've identified in the speech recognition world that you think is a leader today?
No, because the best speech recognition stuff is not happening outside the government. And I think that's about all I'll say about that.
And you're not going to donate all that stuff to IBM or Microsoft or?
We will, ultimately.
Yeah. All right, okay.
But we like to be the early adopter.
All right. Well, I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I figured you'd say that, but we've been waiting for an awfully long time, and for this, you know,
Right.
for exactly this. We've all been predicting it, and we've all been talking about how important it is and how it will radically change how we use all these devices. But it's hard to point at the company today, despite all the money that they're spending, that really is close enough that.
Yeah, I think that's true. There is a lot of research and development going on in this area, and we're funding a lot of it. And I think within the next 5 years, I see some huge breakthroughs. I see a punctuated
which side
equilibrium
of-
moment on the speech recognition.
On the civilian side or on the military side?
My side of the
Yeah,
world.
okay.
But it's going to get out there. I mean, you may or may not realize this, but most of the advances in speech recognition technology today have, in large part, been fueled by investments from people like me. And so there is a lot of benefit. The Google Earth that's out there today, we caused to happen. A lot of people don't know that. It was called Keyhole in our world. And by the way, I have a version of Google Earth on my desktop on a highly classified network, and it's better than what you got.
And it's Google? It's made by Google?
Yes, it is. But it has a little better data than what you got.
Those silly Google guys.
Oh, you know.
They keep doing that.
Yeah, I hate it when that
First
happens.
it was China, now it's you guys. All
That's right. Well, so anyhow, just to get back to consuming media in new ways, I think that the personalization of a big screen experience, anywhere, anytime, I think the key word that I would use is ubiquity. Another thing has to do with electronic billboards. Because LED technology, LCD technology, organic polymer LEDs, and so forth are getting so cheap, you're going to start to see video-type displays everywhere.
Yeah.
And so whether you carry the technology with you or whether the technology is so cheap it gets wallpapered everywhere, I see that basically there will be no place and no time where you can't have a rich media experience.
Right. We were talking about this, I forget which of our many discussions, but yesterday about essentially, I know it was with VJ on Wednesday, the idea that video really is becoming pictures. I mean, all the thoughts we have about photographs, really it's now video. And wherever you were used to seeing a still shot, you should be used to seeing a video next.
Right.
And that's the currency of the realm now. No matter, it's cheap, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It's YouTube, it's in your pocket, it's on your camera. So video is it.
Well, I think video is part of it, but also video teleconferencing. YouTube is a good segue into my next point, which has to do with technology. In addition to increasing the venues of the consumption of traditional media, improves the quality of traditional media. So for example, when I look at YouTube, I see that as being an improvement in the quality of a video experience, in that I get a variety that I didn't get before.
Yeah.
And one of the most important conclusions we reached at Disney about broadband to the home was not the bandwidth of the pipe into the home, but the bandwidth of the pipe from the home. Working with Roger Goodman, who is one of the best directors at ABC, we put together several pilot shows where we did reality shows from the audience. And I think the pressures on the broadcast business, where on the one hand the demand for production resources is driving up the price as you have a proliferation of channels, and the audience is shrinking, is really squeezing them to the point where user-generated content is going to have to not only stay with us, but increase.
Yes.
And the ability to do that, again, if you go back to the ubiquity, the quality and the bandwidth of what I can do anywhere, anytime in my hand or from my home is just going to increase exponentially.
Yeah.
So I think one way in which the quality of content is going to improve and the personalization piece is going to be there is that you're going to see more and more of the audience become the show. in very interesting ways. And if you look at America, there are 300 million of us, and it only takes a few to tell very interesting stories. And that is going to be possible. I think the privacy piece, I get back to the need for privacy and the need for personalization. If the device knows who you are, where you are, and what you want, and it has other contextual information, when do you come online, where do you go, all kinds of other contextual information, it can know absolutely that it's you and not someone else. And it seems contradictory, but it's not, that privacy and personalization and customization are actually two different sides of the same coin. Because if I absolutely know who you are, then I also know who you're not. And if I know who you're not, no one else can get access to your stuff. And yes, any kind of security method can be...
It's that else word that we're focusing on here.
Well, that's true, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not just the biometrics. It's all kinds of other contexts. It's my usage of words. It's when and where I get on.
Yeah.
It's who I talk to.
Right.
There's all this context, which is basically, in the signal processing world, what we call process gain.
Yes.
I have orthogonal views into a same data, so I get root N improvement in signal to noise, that it's you versus someone else.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think that the combination of all that compute power and all that sensor power in a personal device is going to cross a threshold of privacy, where people are going to get personalized content that's just tailored for them, and that same technology will be used to make them very secure, provably secure. I think the last point I want to get to is, I've talked about first how we take traditional content and consume it in new places and new ways. I've talked about how we improve the quality of content. But when you improve the quality of content up to a point, you bend it until it breaks and becomes something entirely new. What you see in the history of media is the new thing echoes the old thing to start with. The first motion picture, somebody took a motion picture camera and put it in front of a stage and filmed the play. Then they figured out movies were different. The first television shows were radio with a video. And then the internet was magazines electronically. But now all of them morphed into something new. So what do I see as an example? I would say that maybe the next big thing, if you combine knowing who you are, where you are, what you want, with mobility and with the ability to project a decent scene, I think you're going to have a fusion of atoms and bits that we used to call enhanced reality or something like that. One of the things we were looking at Disney is taking the out-of-home experience out of a theme park and turning all of the world into a theme park. So the idea was that if you have a device that knows exactly where it is and where it's pointed, it can superimpose a reality onto the world. So for example, you could have a toon world that existed in a subterranean, and it was mapped onto a particular geography, so that you could go to a place and you could see what was going on in that toon world. Or you could go to the Grand Canyon and put your device up and then dial back a billion years and see how the Grand Canyon got to be the Grand Canyon. And I think that the technology is going to allow that. It's novel, and of course, that's not going to happen. I'm sure that's a wrong prediction.
But it's happening now, in the sense that you can go to New York and do a web dial-in and take a tour, self-guided tour of the city, and you at some point you'll be able to point your device to that building, and it'll tell you about that building. And,
No, I think in some form that's going to happen. And you know what will happen is somebody will take this idea and start to develop it, and on the way to discovering it, figure out what really matters. You know, we used to have a saying at Disney: you can't steer a parked car. You know, make a best guess you can, get the best people you can, put your foot on the accelerator, and then adjust as you go.
We say you can't catch fish if the net ain't wet.
Exactly.
So, okay, you take all this stuff. I know that there are some issues that have to do with, you've talked a lot about privacy. You've probably addressed that fully. I have a few other questions I'd like to share with you over a beer sometime, because just out of personal concerns. But I also realize that we've crossed a threshold as a society where a single person can do so much damage that we have to review all these questions. And from the perspective of not only your job, but what is a citizen and what is a good citizen and all that stuff. So I'm fairly comfortable, even though I don't necessarily like it. I've talked myself into it because I think we don't have any choice. So going forward on this, on the tech side of these things, when you look, you're talking about entertainment and reality, and I'm sure you're right about the production costs, and that's just obvious, isn't it? Everyone's worried about, if the old line guys are all worried about the net and the impact that's going to have. A lot of stuff has come to us from Europe in terms of reality television. That's really where Big Brother and all those shows came from, Sweden and Netherlands. Ultimately, you can kind of picture one, and there isn't necessarily one end to this, but one of those ends would be where all of us become producers on some level, video creators, and it's a kind of a YouTube world, and instead of it being somewhat unique, it's just totally common that we are always creating videos and always sharing videos just as a way of talking to each other. Instead of me telling you about the party last night, I just ship you 30 seconds of the party. Instead of you telling me about the conference you went to last week, you just ship me 3 minutes from the conference. And I suppose that will make sense. That's our new language. Video becomes a language. And we don't have to be excellent producers and directors and editors and all that stuff, which is pretty hard to do. We just ship this raw stuff around, and we learn how to, if you care enough, you can splice it together later.
Well, it'll be videos and avatars and virtual worlds, because video and movies are going to remain a big business. But I think if it hasn't happened, it will soon happen, that video games and online massively multiplayer games are going to pass motion pictures in terms of the total revenue.
Yes.
And I think they're just going to keep going. And you look at Second Life and EverQuest and Toontown Online, which is my proudest accomplishment at Disney.
All right.
Which if you have kids, I strongly urge you to do. But I think that this whole business of virtual experiences, and you will start to see a fusion of video and virtual experiences, where you'll go to Second Life and you'll be able to see ESPN, right? If you can't,
or your own videos.
Or your own videos, YouTube and 3Space.
Yeah.
Right. So they're going to be interesting cross pollinations. That we can't predict what they are, but we know they're going to happen.
I kind of picture that as an identifier. If you were to tell me 10 years from now, who am I or who are you? You might already have selected, just like a yearbook, 10 videos. One of yourself on vacation, having fun with your family. One at work, doing something you really, really love doing. One, and just 3 minutes each, kind of a thing. And if my seeing those would go further in helping me understand Eric than sitting with you talking or writing to each other by email. Makes a lot of sense to me that would become the identifying material that we would want to share. We'd try to share. I'd like to leave some time for questions here, and I want to mention, which I didn't do at the beginning of our talk, if you haven't read the agenda or whatever, your technical job is...
I'm Chief Technology Officer of the American Intelligence Community.
Right.
We are an office, very few people know about us, but we are the corporate headquarters of the U.S. intelligence enterprise. So
we being DNI.
The Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
Right.
And I'm the Associate Director of that entity. And my job is, you can think of me as the head, propeller head, or Q.
Right, okay.
And so
someone actually asked me, is this guy Q? And I said, yeah.
I'm Q's boss.
All right, Q's boss. So,
and yeah, by the way, he's a problem employee.
He's gone now. If we could have the lights up a little bit, and if you have questions, please just step up to the microphone. This is maybe your one and only best chance to ask the head of the free world intelligence community a question.
As Mark Bernstein, one of the things you didn't mention has to do with the infrastructure and how IP is going to be able to handle seamless connectivity and also the bandwidth required for all the content that you're talking about. Just be curious on your thoughts about where the network is headed.
I think the biggest factor is going to be wireless. That if I look at, in fact, I asked the head of AT&T at what point in time the number of nodes connecting to the global network that were wireless would pass wired, and then at what point in time the total bandwidth generated from wireless nodes was going to increase. He said that, this was 5 years ago, I asked him, and he said right about now, 2007, is when wireless would beat wired, and then in a few years hence, the total amount of content. If you look at RFID, which I think is the next big thing, is going to be small, and it's going to be RFID, not the tag itself, but the whole system and ecology around it. I think that where I see things going is wireless, particularly in the developing world. If you see where things are really hot right now, you go to India, or you go to China, and a few other places, and they don't have the big legacy infrastructure of copper or fiber. So they're going to leapfrog a generation or two. And they're going to do something much quicker, much cheaper, and they're going to start with wireless. They're going to start with WiMAX. I mean, it's very interesting that WiMAX, which was kind of invented here, is showing up in the Middle East to start with, and other places far before we're going to get it. So one word, I think the future is wireless.
Any more questions?
Hey, Mark. Question would be,
This is Bruce
I run
Wilcox.
Project Inkwell. This is Bruce Wilcox with Project Inkwell, and we're driving this push towards devices in the hands of every school child. And I think your background is unique in that here you have this kind of Disney ideation, innovation background, and now background in security. What role do you think children will play in the future with regard to that?
Well, first of all, children are our future. When I look at our biggest problems in the intelligence community, it's really a human resource problem. There are a bunch of old farts like me who don't get it, going up against a bunch of really smart young people, Al-Qaeda. And that's a huge problem. And what we have right now in the intelligence community is what we call a bathtub. We have a bunch of people who were recruited since 9/11 at one end, very young, nobody in the middle, because in the whole 90s we stopped recruiting, and then a bunch of old farts like me. And so we have this big hole in the middle. But sooner or later, those young kids are going to move in and fill up that hole. And then kids are going to come in with all of their experiences. And I think the most important thing that kids are going to provide us in the intelligence community is that they are going to be very comfortable with technology, and they're going to know how to use open source really well to find information, because that's called homework. So from a selfish point of view, I look at the fabulous smarts that these new generations of kids have as being a great human resource for us. But I think the other thing is, who drives technology in the direction that it goes? Who are the killer app consumers? And I get back to the video game piece as being a big driver. What Intel told me and what Microsoft told me when I was at Disney is that office automation is no longer the killer app for PCs and IT. It's entertainment. And who is the center of gravity of entertainment? And where are all the hot new things coming from? It's in the young demographic. So I think if we want to look at where the future of consumer technology is going to go, it's going to be in that demographic that you mentioned.
Great. I think we're actually out of time.
Okay. This has been a great pleasure.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you.